Chapter 1: The Collapse of Compassion. By the mid-21st century, the Republic of Solara had perfected a paradox. A society so generous it starved its future. For decades, Solara's social contract promised everything: free housing, universal healthcare, cradle-to-grave education, guaranteed food rations, legal aid, even psychic wellness stipends, to anyone who declared need. No proof required, no performance expected, just existence was enough to qualify. At first, it seemed noble. But biology and economics are indifferent to virtue signaling. The unintended consequence was stark. The welfare system didn't just support the vulnerable, it rewarded passivity. Those with lower cognitive capacity and minimal work ethic, unburdened by ambition or long-term planning, found the path of least resistance. Claim benefits, avoid responsibility, and reproduce early and often. With food, shelter, and childcare guaranteed by the state, there was no evolutionary or economic pressure to delay parenthood or develop skills. Fertility rates among chronic welfare recipients climbed, while among high IQ, hardworking professionals they plummeted. Why? Because the high achievers were crushed. A software engineer, a surgeon, a solar farm technician, they paid 60%, sometimes 75%, of their income in taxes to fund a system that actively disincentivized their values. Discipline, innovation, delayed gratification. After taxes, rent, and regulatory compliance, they had little left to save, let alone raise children in a world that seemed to punish foresight. Many chose childlessness. Others emigrated when borders still existed. Meanwhile, the state swelled. Bureaucracy became a self-sustaining organism. Nearly half the workforce processed forms for benefits they themselves received. Productivity flatlined. Innovation stalled. National IQ measured not by elitism, but by PISA scores, patent filings, and problem-solving in crisis simulations began a measurable decline. Solara wasn't failing from malice, but from misaligned incentives. It paid people not to grow. Then came the sovereign default of 2045. When foreign creditors refused to roll over Solara's debt, the lights flickered in ministries, not homes. The state couldn't pay its own clerks. Hospitals ran on volunteer goodwill. Food distribution collapsed, not from scarcity, but from lack of truckers willing to work for worthless scrip. Into the void stepped the Provisional Council of Performance. Their first act wasn't to cut benefits, it was to abolish unearned entitlements entirely. No more free housing for non-contributors. No more open-ended healthcare without demonstrated economic participation. Education remained free, but only through secondary school. Higher learning required either merit-based scholarships or personal investment. Their second act was radical simplicity. A performance-linked tax code with no surveillance, no social scoring, no behavioral tracking. Income would be the sole metric, and the more you earned through verifiable production, not speculation, not rent-seeking, the lower your tax rate. Earn below the subsistence threshold, pay 0%, but receive nothing beyond emergency shelter and basic rations. Earn modestly through honest labor, pay 15%. Generate high-value output, engineering, research, manufacturing. Teaching, pay as low as 3%. Found a company that exports clean energy or medical tech. Negative taxation, the state pays you a performance dividend. No algorithms, no blood accountants, no Pano scores, just bank records, contracts, and public contribution. If you built something real, the system rewarded you, not with praise but with time, capital, and freedom. And freedom meant family. Within 5 years, high IQ professionals, now keeping 90% of their income, began marrying, investing in homes, and having children. Not out of nostalgia, but because they finally had the resources and security to raise the next generation of builders. The welfare-dependent population didn't vanish overnight, but it aged out. Without state subsidies for idle reproduction, birth rates among non-contributors collapsed. Meanwhile, the children of performers entered elite academies, not waiting rooms. 10 years in, Solara's average national IQ had risen by 14 points. Crime fell by 82%. Entrepreneurship tripled. And life expectancy, once stagnant, began climbing again, not from handouts, but from purpose, nutrition, and pride in creation. Nations around the world took notice. They called it the SMI superscript 2 LE principle. Space migration readiness. Merit-based income incentives. Intelligence increase through selective pressure. Institutional simplicity, no bureaucracy. Life extension via health earned through discipline. Economic freedom as the foundation of dignity. Solara no longer begged for aid. It sold propulsion tech to Mars colonies and AI tutors to Earth's last democracies. The old world called it cruel. The new one called it clarity. And in the heart of New Helio City, where welfare queues once snaked for blocks, a single inscription now stood at the entrance of the Innovation Foundry. We do not give you life. We give you the chance to earn a better one. Chapter 2: The Merit Dividend. 5 years after the Great Reset, Solara didn't just function, it accelerated. The Provisional Council had made one crucial philosophical choice: trust output, not oversight. There were no social credit scores, no mandatory participation logs, no AI scanning your grocery purchases for lifestyle conformity. If you generated real economic value, designing fusion stabilizers, coding decentralized logistics networks, teaching quantum literacy in rural academies, the state didn't watch you, paid you back. This became known as the merit dividend, a direct cash rebate equal to a percentage of the national productivity uplift your work generated. A hydroponics engineer who boosted crop yields by 12% in arid zones didn't just keep 97% of her salary. She received an annual bonus tied to the tons of food her system produced. A neurologist who developed a low-cost neural rehab protocol saw her dividend rise with every patient who returned to work. Taxes were inverted so completely that the top 5% of contributors, the true high IQ, high-effort performers, effectively subsidized the state. They didn't mind. For the first time in generations, they had time. Time to mentor apprentices. Time to tinker in garage labs. Time to fall in love, marry, and raise children without guilt or financial terror. And they did. Fertility among Solara's cognitive elite surged. Not because of propaganda, but because biology responded to incentive. When a couple could afford 3 children, a home with a garden, and private tutors without drowning in debt, they chose abundance. These children weren't pampered, they were trained. Homes became incubators of curiosity. Calculus at breakfast, robotics by 10, ethics debates at dinner. Parental leave was generous, but only for those who had earned it through prior contribution. Again, no surveillance, just transparent thresholds. Meanwhile, the old welfare class aged in quiet attrition. Without state-funded childcare or housing subsidies for idle parenthood, reproduction among the chronically unproductive collapsed. Those who couldn't or wouldn't contribute weren't punished. They simply faded into irrelevance, living on basic rations in communal dormitories, free to leave whenever they chose to build. And some did. A former benefits claimant named Joe Rin, once dependent on emotional hardship allowances, retrained as a drone maintenance tech after watching his neighbor's son launch a weather balloon satellite. Within 2 years, he was paying taxes, low but proudly, and saving for a daughter's education. His story wasn't rare. It was designed. The result? Solara's population became smarter, healthier, and more capable with every cohort. PISA scores soared. Patent filings per capita surpassed pre-collapse global peaks. Life expectancy hit 94. Not from free medicine, but from clean air, purposeful work, and low-stress social trust. And then came the off-world opportunity. The Martian colonization accord needed partners with high cognitive resilience, low corruption, and scalable tech. Solara was the only Earth nation that qualified. Under the SMI Superscript 2 LE Compact, Solara would receive priority launch slots, lunar mining rights, and cryostasis R&D funding, in exchange for exporting its governance model. Not by force, but by example. You don't need to abolish welfare. Solara's emissaries told struggling nations. Start paying them to appear. Earth scoffed. Mars took notes. Back home, classrooms now ended lessons with a simple mantra. Earn your future. Build beyond it. And above the orbital elevator rising from New Helios, a new flag flew, not of conquest, but of invitation. It bore no weapons, only a human brain, a seedling, and a star. Chapter 3. The Children of Light. By 2060, Solara no longer debated whether merit-based renewal worked. It was busy exporting it to the stars. The first generation raised entirely under the SMI Superscript 2 LE principle, dubbed the luminaries, had come of age. They were not merely smarter. They were different. With childhoods unburdened by the noise of entitlement culture and enriched by parental presence, not just financial support, but time, attention, and intellectual engagement. Their cognitive development outpaced all historical norms. Average IQ among Solara's 18 to 25 cohort now stood at 128, a full standard deviation above the global mean. But more importantly, their practical intelligence, problem-solving under stress, collaborative innovation, long-term systems thinking, was off the charts. They didn't just ace exams. They redesigned them. At 16, a Luminaries team reverse-engineered a failing fusion reactor on Ceres using only open-source schematics and scrap metal. Their fix? A magnetic containment field modulated by biofeedback from the crew's own neural implants, conceived during a high school physics duel. Education had been stripped of ideology and recentered on mastery, not metrics. There were no grades below age 12, only guided exploration. After that, advancement was tied to real-world deliverables. Build a water purifier for a desert outpost, code a predictive disease model for lunar habitats, design a low-gravity school curriculum. Failure wasn't penalized, it was iterative. But passivity had no place. You either engaged or stepped aside. And because high performers paid minimal taxes, often less than 2%, families thrived. The average Solara household with 2 working professionals had 2.8 children, compared to 0.9 in legacy welfare states. These weren't elite bubbles. They were multi-generational innovation cells. Grandparents, many now living past 110, thanks to longevity therapies funded by national surplus, taught philosophy. Parents engineered. Children prototyped. Space migration became the ultimate merit filter. The orbital selection trials weren't about strength. They were about resilience intelligence. Candidates spent 30 days in simulated Mars habitats with failing life support, ambiguous command structures, and resource scarcity. Only those who demonstrated calm creativity, ethical leadership, and the ability to teach others under duress earned a seat on the Exodus arcs. Notably, over 70% of off-world colonists came from families that had once been middle class under the old regime. Teachers, mechanics, nurses who, freed from punitive taxation, had reinvested their earnings into upskilling and child development. The old aristocracy of inheritance had been replaced by an aristocracy of applied intelligence. Back on Earth, other nations began to fracture. Some doubled down on welfare, only to watch their youth flee to Solara's orbital embassies, where even janitors on space stations earned performance dividends and had voting rights in colony charters. Others adopted diluted versions of SMI superscript 2LE, but failed because they kept surveillance, kept bureaucracy, kept the lie that everyone contributes equally. Solara's secret wasn't harshness. It was clarity. Contribution was visible. Reward was immediate. Dignity was earned, not given, not taken, but built. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything. Dr. Alira Voss, a Luminaries geneticist and daughter of a former arena cleaner turned bioengineer, published the Neuroflux Protocol, a safe, non-invasive epigenetic treatment that enhanced synaptic plasticity and delayed cognitive aging. Funded entirely by her merit dividend from earlier neural interface work, it was offered free to all Solara citizens over 25. Life extension wasn't a privilege for the rich. It was the dividend of a society that finally valued builders over beggars. Within a year, Solara announced its most audacious goal yet, Project Cradle, a self-sustaining exoplanet colony where every citizen would be selected not by wealth or birth, but by demonstrated capacity to create value across generations. Earth called it elitist. The stars called it inevitable. And in New Helios, children no longer asked, "What will I be when I grow up?" They asked, "What world will I build?" Chapter 4. The Realized Horizon. By 2075, Solara was no longer a nation, it was a civilizational operating system. The model had proven brutally effective, not through cruelty, but through evolutionary economics. A system that aligned biological reality with economic incentive. Human capital was no longer wasted subsidizing stagnation. It was concentrated, cultivated, and launched toward horizons. Realistic outcomes of the SMI superscript 2LE society. 1. Demographic transformation. Within 2 generations, the share of the population classified as chronically unproductive, defined as zero verifiable economic contribution for 5+ years, fell from 38% to under 4%. This wasn't due to extermination or exile, it was demographic attrition. Without state subsidies enabling early, unplanned reproduction among low IQ, low-effort individuals, their birth rates collapsed naturally. Meanwhile, high-performing households, financially secure, time-rich, and future-oriented, had more children, invested heavily in their development, and passed on both genes and habits of discipline. The result? A national Flynn reversal. Average IQ rose 18 points in 25 years, with verbal reasoning and abstract problem-solving leading the gain. 2. Crime collapse. Violent crime dropped by 91%. Why? Because predation thrives in dependency. When survival no longer required theft, fraud, or violence, and when legitimate paths to status, arena trials, innovation grants, off-world selection were open to anyone with grit, the incentive to break norms vanished. Prisons were repurposed into maker academies. Former gang leaders became orbital security trainers. The last homicide in Solara's core territories occurred in 2059, over a dispute about water rationing in a transitional dorm. After that, even the last welfare enclaves adopted peer-led honor codes. 3. Hyper-responsive personalization. Without a bloated bureaucracy, Solara's economy became anticipatory, not reactive. AI-driven market signals, fed by real-time production data, not social media sentiment, allowed goods and services to adapt to individual needs at unprecedented speed. A diabetic farmer in the equatorial belt received custom-grown insulin-producing algae within 48 hours of diagnosis. Not because the state provided it, but because a biofoundry earned merit dividends by solving niche health challenges. Education, housing, even dietary plans were tailored not by government forms, but by voluntary contracts between citizens and performance-rated providers. If a service failed, the provider lost dividend eligibility. Reputation was everything. 4. The end of regressive taxation. The old model, the more you earn, the more you owe, was recognized as economically suicidal. Solara inverted it. The more you create, the more you keep. Top contributors paid as little as 0.5% in taxes, while those at subsistence paid 0%. This didn't increase inequality, it accelerated upward mobility. A street coder who built an efficient traffic AI could leap from rations to a hillside home in under 2 years. Wealth wasn't hoarded. It was recycled into more creation. Venture capital dried up, not because money vanished, but because high-performers self-funded projects using their retained earnings. 5. Space as the ultimate filter. Off-world colonies became the proving grounds for civilizational fitness. Mars, Ceres, and the Helios belt stations operated under pure SMI superscript 2 LE. No welfare, no tenure-track bureaucracy. You contributed or you returned. Mortality was higher, but so was meaning. Colonists lived 15 to 20 years longer than earthbound peers, not from medicine alone, but from purpose density. And crucially, these outposts sent back innovations that further refined Earth's system. Closed-loop water recyclers, neural skill accelerators, AI co-pilots for elderly care. 6. Global ripple effects. By 2080, 17 nations had adopted SMI superscript 2 LE light frameworks. None matched Solar's purity, but even partial implementation yielded results. 22% average GDP growth in adopters, 40% drop in youth unemployment, and measurable IQ gains in children. The old UN was replaced by the Pact of Performers, a coalition of merit-based polities sharing tech, not aid. Critics still whispered, "It's eugenics by spreadsheet," but Solara's reply was lived, not spoken. In New Helios, a 112-year-old former welfare clerk, now a revered mentor in asteroid mining ethics, sat with a 9-year-old prodigy designing a zero-gravity orchard. No one tracked their Pano score. No algorithm judged their worth. They were simply two humans, one passing light to the next. And high above, the Exodus arcs burned toward Proxima Centauri, not carrying the best. But those who proved they could build a world from nothing. Because in the end, Solara's lesson was this: a society doesn't rise by lifting the unwilling. It rises by freeing the willing to soar.